Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid.
I promise you, this is not a political podcast.
Jump, from the deep into the pool, set up the mood. Paranoid radio, set up the mood. Paranoid radio, set up the mood. Paranoid radio, set up the mood. 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 Set up the mood.
It's not a political.
Trying this new precision on the mic, and I swear to freaking God, it's harder to focus. Testicles 1, 2, testicles. Welcome back to Paranoid Radio Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I am Trebles Garcia, and I want to thank the Lord for allowing me to be here today, and I want to thank every single one of you for allowing me to enter your space. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I have an amazing episode lined up for all of you guys. Before anything, I want to remind you that the most important thing that you could do for the show today and tomorrow is word of mouth. Check us out at paranoidradio.com. Check out the affiliations with Flavors of the Forest. And drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That allows other people to enjoy the show as much as I enjoy making it. And that is the intro on every single episode. Guys, we sold out. We're on YouTube. Yes, I know. They're probably going to take it down. But you guys got to check us out on YouTube. Most of you guys are freaking lazy and don't want to take the five seconds to the search bar. Go to the search bar and search for the name of Paranoid Radio Podcast. And most of you guys like to death scroll on TikTok and just watch ass every single day and just spend time and do hours of just ass watching every single day. Who am I to blame you? I'm not judging. I'm just saying, check us out at paranoidradio.com and go to the search bar. Allow me to jump in from the deep end of the pool and set the mood. Please allow me to introduce my next special guest, the legendary Tony Arterburn. How's it going, bro?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, and thank Megan, your publicist, for hitting me up and for arranging this amazing podcast.
Oh, I always thank her. She's the reason I do about 75% of the media that I do. So yeah, shout out to her.
Good stuff, man. Hey, you're a character. I see that you have a large following. You're doing great work out there. Tell me a little bit about you and where can people find you?
Well, I was a U.S. Army paratrooper, a military policeman. I was a veteran of 3 foreign wars, and I got back home in 2004 and decided I was going to start some businesses. I tried all kinds of things, real estate and fast food and convenience stores, you name it. And I think my love of history, coming up through the military and just seeing the things that I saw and reading the books that I read, and I drifted into precious metals, understanding the root cause of a lot of what we research in alternative media. You know, they say, follow the money. Well, it's literally true. You follow the money and the source of the money supply itself, who controls that. And it became a fascinating journey for me. I'm very thankful for what I get to do every day, and that's take people out of fake fiat currency and put them into real, actual precious metals or cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. And that's been my life's calling, that in broadcasting. I also did powerlifting for a number of years when I was a kid, and was on the U.S. team, and I set some world records and did stuff like that. And I've had an interesting life. I'm 45 years old now. Get up every day and try to make sense of the zeitgeist and break down and decode the dystopia. It's a full-time job. So
I love it.
Love what I do.
Having a full-time job doing what you love is actually not so bad. It's actually a good problem to have, bro.
That's true.
Thank you so much for your service, dude. Freedom ain't free, and I appreciate that, bro. Because of people like you, I get to do what I want today and live freely and have Wi-Fi and live for excess, the American way.
It takes all of us collectively together. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And we need so much more of that awareness of what's actually going on, not what the machine wants you to think or wants you to interpret as reality. You have to think for yourself. And it's not good enough just to listen to me or you or anybody else. People have to think for themselves. And
thinking for
have
themselves.
Some discernment.
It's something real hard to come by nowadays.
Yeah. Very hard.
I have some bullet points here. You are here in and out real quick to drop bombs and make deposits into the bank of knowledge. You have some information behind closed vaults, the untold story of the life before inflation and the hijacking of the monetary system by elites in the 19th century. Woo! Here we go.
Well, yeah, it's been an age-old game. I mean, this is always the cyclical part of history. There's nations, great empires rise on sound money, and that would be like gold or silver, limited supply, value in and of itself, scarce, precious. That's the reason they call them precious metals. They rise on sound money and things like economic nationalism, making things production, and they decline on fiat currency, which is fiat means by decree in Latin, means they say so. They die on fake money, and they die on things like free trade policies. And I'm all for free markets, but there's something completely different there. Those are the two things I put together as far as like cyclical history, and you can see it over and over again, repeating this pattern of rise and fall. And we're in this period of decline. This is the fall part of the empire system that we're currently in. So, history is a pack of lies agreed upon. There's so many great quotes on it. That was something Napoleon said, that history was a pack of lies agreed upon. But I like something that I learned from Pat Buchanan, and that was the only lesson we learned from history is that we do not learn from history. And so that's what the pattern continues. And so I think we're just in a really interesting time where you're seeing the death of currency in general, because something interesting happened in 1971. Richard Nixon interrupts an episode of Bonanza on August 15th, 1971. Ironically, it's a show about people going out west to find gold and silver. And he takes us off the gold standard. He closes the gold window, what he claimed to be temporary. And at the time, gold was pegged to the dollar at $35 an ounce, and we were the world's reserve currency. So all over the world, you can get an ounce of gold for $35. By the end of the 1970s, from 71 to 79, gold was $800 an ounce. But here's the real rub, the part of the story that you don't get taught in school. Gold didn't go up in value. So what happened was that's the loss of the purchasing power of the dollar against a fixed asset. And that's the reason, like, the founding fathers put gold and silver in the Constitution of the United States, because there's been so many experiments throughout history of showing that fiat currency is not only does it not work, it's pure evil. Because it robs you of your energy and your work and your future, while a group of elite benefit like parasitically off of everything that you do. And that's why in the Constitution of the United States, it calls upon only Congress can coin money, and it has to be gold and silver. And so that's why things like the Federal Reserve Bank, it's not a bank, but that's what they called it, a Federal Reserve. It's not federal, and it's not a reserve. That was enacted in 1913, but there was a whole series of conspiracy to get us there to that point of the Christmas Eve 1913, when that was
Titanic
pushed through. So there's a massive conspiracy, but that was to hijack the money supply outside of the Constitution and the framework of the republic that was set up here in this country. And that's why we have the problems that we do today. I mean, every conspiracy that you're tracking all tracks back to this. I call it, I say fiat is fake. It's the head of the snake. I make it rhyme. That's something I started doing, 6-7 years ago on radio. I said, now think about that. So everything that we do, it tracks back to this fake fiat currency that floats around and literally robs you of your future. And while a select group get richer and richer, well, they buy more and more assets, and you work harder and harder to make less and less. And eventually the system implodes, and they'll do a reset, which they actually call it that. They call it the Great Reset.
right to our faces.
Rob, yeah, they just bring it up right to your face. And I try to remind people, let's okay, what was the inflation rate, let's say from the time of George Washington to the time of, the turn of the 20th century. So let's say, it was 1798 to 1902. I mean, what was the inflation rate? 0. So, I mean, if you bought, a set of clothes to go see George Washington's inaugural, you'd pay the same in 1902. Okay? So there's no inflation. And the reason is we had a bimetallic gold and silver standard. And inflation is it's not supposed to be a part of, actually, the prices of goods in a free market should go down, because things should be deflationary. There should be better ways to make something more cost effective. There's always, bringing that to market. But because we live in the upside down, things get more expensive, things get more bloated, and projects that shouldn't be built are built. Projects that should be built aren't. You understand? Like entertainers politicians, like these are propped up by fake money. So like the worst of us. So, you know, if you had accountability at some level, that's why once you see the metrics from 1971 on, and of course you can have whatever opinion you want on the space program, but we didn't go back to the moon after 1972. You know, there was so much lost in science and technology, and it had to do with exactitude, engineering, other things. We made some advances here and there, but not on a whole. Like, and so it's an interesting thing to examine what happened to society after 1971. It's very destructive, and that's why I say it's not merely an economic problem; it's a spiritual problem to have people at the top being able to control the money supply in the way that they do. So I love what I get to do. This is the historical examples, but you know, you throw out quotes like Mayor Amschel Rothschild from the 19th century. He said, I care not who sits on the British throne. The person who controls the British Empire is the person who controls the British money supply, and I control the British money supply. That's a real quote. You got to think about that. That's pretty evil. Like, you control the empire.
Pretty straightforward too.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time to be alive. I think a lot of this is coming out in the open. You know, it's not a perfect world. We're never going to have the perfect spokesman or the perfect political movement or anything like that. But every year I see a rise in consciousness that they overlords, I think they have a really hard time suppressing, even with the technology and even with the censorship and controlled opposition. I think they really still do have a problem. Once your mind is open to a certain level, a new level of thought, it can never close back to its original size, right? Back to its dimensions. So that's why I get people to think. Like, I'm not talking at people. I want to have a conversation. Like, let's talk about why history is the way it is. I mean, do you think it's organic? Like, we're taught in school that everything's an accident, we're all floating around. I don't believe that. I mean, I think a big portion of history is absolutely controlled. So, you know, there's so much to unpack there, whether you're talking about the history of the monetary system or the history of the deep state. And they go together like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah. Time. I think one of the biggest conspiracy theories of all time is time. The way they set it up, because they can control what you're consuming. They can control when you put your money in and out. They can control how much they pay you, when they pay you, when you have to go get whatever you need to get so they could pay you. And then the timing predicts how much you're going to get paid, how much they're going to tax you, how you're going to spend that money, how your kids are going to spend that money, and then the habits, and then the trends, and then the consumption for your kids. And then your kids are medically induced, and they're under pharmaceutical because they're chemically unbalanced, because they're eating the wrong foods, because you are giving them the wrong food, because it's cheap for you to give them the wrong foods. It's a freaking wheel. They got you coming and going, bro. I have this joke. Kiss, the band, they used to have their faces on caskets and on condoms. They got you coming and going, bro. It's the harsh truth of life.
Yeah. They used to call that, what was it? I heard that, oh gosh, some show from the 90s. They called it like a logo feces or something like that. It's just, they put the logo on everything and so corporatized.
Yeah.
They bring that up in Fight Club. You know, like the corporations will
very conspiratorial movie as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Fantastic.
It's the takeover of the education system, the entertainment, what we consume every single day, the money, the way we spend our money. Even some even want to push the envelope on how we worship. They've been infiltrated. They infiltrated the churches. They've infiltrated most of the most impactful religions in the world, and they've made a mockery of us. And we have Stockholm syndrome, bro. We're in love with our enslaver. We have. I've talked about. I'm not a very religious man, but now that I'm sober, I've reached a height in my life, and I call it a height because I've tried getting high, I've tried drinking, I've tried women, I've tried different things in life, but I've never tried a little Jesus. And then now that I turn out the Bible, I look at the Bible, and I don't look at the Bible looking for spiritual guidance. I look at the Bible looking for a conspiracy theory, bro. And I find that everything that we have been living through, or at least myself in my 34 years of life, I've seen that, holy crap, it was written before. The story's right there. Everything.
Sure. Yeah, it's
You
right
know?
there. Yeah, the only Harry Truman was channeling King Solomon. We said the only thing new under the sun is the history you don't know. It's all right
Damn.
there.
Yeah. Interesting stuff, dude. I have another point here. Monedas, if I'm butchering this up, guys, please excuse me. Hashtag look it up. Monedas whisper how the Roman goddess name echoes in timeless warning in money. Whoa, this is historical.
Yeah, so I read about the history of currency and money all the time. And one of my favorite things to source was the actual that's one of the things I wanted to know when I was a young soldier and started reading history. I was like, wait, I'm interested in money. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He built things. He built a bank. He chartered things. He was a guy that worked harder than I've ever seen anybody work in my life. And I was always knew if you had a thought in here, if you could think it up and then you could believe in your solar plexus that you could make it reality. You could build a building, you could build a house, you could make something that wasn't because you thought it and believed it. So I always believed it, but I always wanted to know, where does money come from? Like, how do we assign value to that? What is it? And so all throughout the years in my study of history, one of the stories that I love to tell is around I don't want the timeline's off. There's about the 4th century BC, and the Romans were at war with the Gauls, which are the modern, that would be the modern day French today. And they were guarding the palace of was Juno. At the time, it was a sanctuary, a palace, a citadel. And when they were about to be attacked, these geese flew over and honked, and it warned the Roman soldiers that there was about to be a sneak attack, and they were able to ward it off. And so after that attack was repelled, they renamed the cathedral, they renamed it for the goddess Moneta, which she was the goddess of warning. Okay. And that's where they made the first money. That's where they've made the first mint. So that's where the coins came from. So that particular religious structure that was named after the goddess Moneta became money. So money is moneta. So interesting enough, your money is a warning to the society and the relationship that it has to you. So like, that's one of the things I thought was so mind-blowing about that, like this root word of the money or mint out of that renaming of the structure was actually something that we could think about today. Our money, what we think of as money, is an actual warning. So it's funny. I mean, it's really, history has all sorts of twists and turns like that. But literally, I think watching, if you want to know how's your society doing, what kind of money you have. Are you on a hamster wheel where it's completely devaluing all the time, and you have these super elite creating out of thin air, sitting keys on a keyboard, or just printing into oblivion? Or do you have to account for it? Does it have to match up to something? Is there, they call it sound money for a reason. We call it gold and silver because of the sound that it makes. It makes an intrinsic ring. It's not just that it sound like it's, solid. There's a sound that it makes, a very distinct sound. So all that's really important to understand where you are. Like, it's like, well, we're going to have the tariff, right? We're going to put I like tariffs, by the way, but let's throw that. We're going to have tariffs. And then some people say tariffs are bad. Some people say tariffs are good. It's going to tank the market, whatever. Well, you can't fix the system until you fix the money. Right. And you can't fix the political system until you fix the money. If we go to fix the money, there's going to be, it'd be a total revolution of our timeline if we actually went to go fix the money right now. And that's what's so interesting, and what makes what I do important, I believe, or at least fulfilling as a calling, is I like to talk to people about, this history and why it's important for you to understand it so you don't get caught off guard, why you need to understand the difference between currency and money. It's very important to understand the difference between currency and money. You can have both. right? They can be both. They can be both currency and money. But today we have currency without being money also. And money, by the way, money in and of itself should have a value outside of the monetary system. Like my, I'm wearing a gold coin. It's interesting enough, if you can see it on camera. This gold coin was minted in 1979. If you zoomed in, you'd see that it has the hammer and sickle on it. It's a Soviet Russian gold coin. So the gold coin outlasted the government, right? It outlasted the economic system in which it was produced. But by the end of so that from 1971 to 1979, gold went from $35 an ounce to $800 an ounce. So I got a piece of that history around my neck, and it reminds me of the permanence of something like gold and temporary, transitory things like governments and fiat currency. So just a little history lesson there. The money in and of itself should be valuable outside of a bank. Like should be, you can use gold for jewelry. You can use it for electronics. You can use it for medicine. Same thing with silver. So regardless if it's a monetary metal, it also has other uses. It has an intrinsic value in and of itself in scarcity. Today's fiat currency doesn't do that, and it constantly loses value. So these are this is giving enough information for people to get interested to learn for themselves.
And to hit you up so that you can teach them.
Well, I like to. That's what I do. I'm on the phone usually all day, or I'm on conference calls, and that's what I love to do.
Political paralysis, the currency versus money debate, and its impact on freedom. I come from an era, bro, where money, it wasn't everything. I'll be playing outside instead of being on my phone. It was more of an analog place to live. And we didn't have internet, at least not my household, and it wasn't as privileged. And now that I see how things are evolving in my kids will never, ever be able to experiment playing basketball outside without wanting to know what social media is or partake into it, right? It's a horrible place because we lost a piece of that. I could only tell them about it. So give me a moment here. I lost my train of thought. The impact on freedom, the more time advances and technology keeps progressing, we tend to be replacing the word freedom with safety. And then COVID happened, and then we forgot about our freedoms. We forgot about the rights that made us free. And we decided to completely engulf into safety. Now people are they're happy feeling safe than actually having freedom, than walking around strapped, basically. They rather just feel safe by their enslaver. And but what is the paralysis, political paralysis, bro?
Well, I think that this has a lot to do with the conversation we're having in general, is that when you leave accountability and there's a free-for-all, it makes it harder and harder to have transparency, because you can bury it under a mountain of corruption. Donald Rumsfeld came out on September 10th, 2001, very famously, and said that the Pentagon could not track $2.3 trillion. Okay. And this is in 2001, the day before 9/11.
Yeah.
And he said, he told that the Pentagon had put together an accounting team, and they're going to be at this wing in the Pentagon. And the next day, whatever hit the Pentagon hit that office.
I like the way you said that. Whatever hit the Pentagon.
Yeah, because you don't know. I don't know. And, fun fact about me, I was part of the first Army unit on the ground in Afghanistan after 9/11. But originally I was in the unit that was supposed to that was going to have to go to the Pentagon immediately following 9/11. So in a different timeline, I'd be able to tell you what I saw, because my unit that I was with, I just happened to be in Bulgaria at the time, representing the U.S. on the American powerlifting team. So that unit that I was with went to the Pentagon, and then they put me to another unit that happened to be the first Army company on the ground in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So I got to see some of that frontline history. And I mean, I don't believe that a plane struck the Pentagon. I just don't. Just given every bit of 9/11 research that I've done, and I can't. I mean, but who knows? They don't. It's one of the most heavily surveilled buildings in the world, and you don't. The only
I don't
footage
understand
you
how
have
that
is
happened.
this streak going across. Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, hard to say what the hell's going on there, but it's a bizarre thing, and 9/11 is another thing to unpack. But it has a lot to do with the era in which we live, or error in which we live, and I think a lot of this ties back to the controllers and what they do with the money supply. I often cite there's another weird rabbit hole of history that I think is interesting. And in 1986, somebody was at an estate sale and they bought an used IBM copier. And inside the IBM copier was one draft that had been left in there as the original that somebody had made a copy of a technical manual dated May 1st, 1979. Of course, that's the birthday of the Illuminati. Not May 1st, 79, but May 1st, 1776. But they have this document. It's a technical manual called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And that's a real story, by the way. So whether the manual's real or not, but that story about somebody finding it and then making copies of it, because it's a bizarre document. I encourage your audience to read Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, whether or not it was meant to be a true technical manual or something, but somebody wrote it and it wasn't for mass production, literally found in a copier. And it has, the first chapter is all about what I just discussed. And it's the transmutation of energy from money from people.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa. I wasn't expecting you hitting this conspiratorial talk that deep.
Well, that's the fun stuff, man. I mean, that's like, it's an if you believe in God or not. Do you think it's like, do you believe in evil? Do you believe that there's light and dark? Do you believe that or are you just, oh, it's just all a conspiracy? There's a lot of conspiracies that are stupid. Okay. And there's a lot of alternative media that's pretty dumb. And you can get on some weird things, but anything if you're listening to me, I've researched it, I've read it, I've thought about it, I've run it through several different, counterbalances, and I can't prove everything that I talk about, but I feel like that it's closer to the truth than anything. I try to do that, but that's a true thing. And it cites the Rothschilds and how they use that to basically create the modern reality that we have. And it just shows people as cogs in a machine to achieve putting their energy out into the system, absorbed by the monetary system because it's ever evaporating parasitically, right? Enhancing the elites instead of us having a more stable across the board level playing field. And so it's an interesting document. And I like people to go check that out. It's not a long read, but it is looking at, it's looking at, the technical manual, like a how-to on genocide, and enslavement. And the first chapter is about money. So that's where you start, right? You start with the monetary system. It's not just about metrics or numbers or economics. It's a spiritual thing.
They went from owning black folks to owning all folks. In a sense. Yeah.
There's stakes on the table. That's the cattle, that's the terms that are used in that book. It's just meant for, like, you are a cog in a machine. It's like George Carlin said, it's like, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Oh man.
Right. Great quote. Yeah. But it's a very small fraction of people that have this sort of control. I mean, most people are just trying to make a living. They're putting their kids through school. They're working a job. They're doing the best they can. And, time is ever disappearing. It's harder and harder to, you get a weird guy like me who's at home alone with his chihuahua and, listening to old books and watching documentaries and doing this for a living, so God's been real good to me. There's certain sacrifices that you make when you're me. and I've made those, and I love what I do, and I should lean more into it. But I find that to be so. If you're aware of the con, then it's a lot easier to get ahead. It's a lot easier to understand. And look, I'm not aware of everything, and I learn something new every single day. I'm surprised by things every single day, and I'm thankful every single day. Like I don't. There's a big debate on, are you red pilled? Are you white pilled? Are you black pilled? It's like
So many freaking pills now, man.
so many
We just
pills.
had two.
You're just popping pills. I just say take them all at once with a monster, or like whatever. It's like
See what happens
in the military. I think I saw a meme, and it was like Morpheus's face when I take the red and the blue pill at the same time. I just think
this mother trucker's crazy.
Is like, whoa. Yeah, it's like being in the military, being a combat vet, and you're out there just busting your ass, and then you're hurting, and then they just give you 800 milligram Motrin in a Red Bull, or a cup of coffee or whatever, and
some dirt in it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive, and a lot to be thankful for too. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think the system's changed. History's cyclical. You just have like the timeline you're on. And I think everybody that's here right now is meant to be here. I think that if you're aware and you're helping people and you're trying to bring some good to this world and do the best you can, you're part of the solution, which is it's really not hard to change the whole world. If you just change how you interact with people every single day, it's tough. Because it's tough to interact with human beings. That's why when you talk about reading the Bible, you read about New Testament, and you read about, of course Jesus was divine. Could you imagine? A human being can't do that. It's like the level of kindness and understanding. And then the one time he got angry and showed wrath was the money changers in the temple, which is like, I think I'm onto something. And by the way, he's the only religious figure, icon, whatever you want to call him, of all the faiths that did that. There's something to that, right? It's not just
bam.
There's something to that message of the manipulation of value, because it goes beyond monetary. You have to understand, it's not just, to me, the more I learn about gold, silver, Bitcoin, it's a representation of energy. Energy is divine. Like, you have God in you. You're a piece of that, having that experience, and your gift is your subconscious mind. So like everything you speak into, that's why in the beginning of the Bible, in the beginning was the word, right? So what you say, there's a magic to it. That's why it's called spelling. Words are magic. And God intended that, in my opinion. God intended that because you're most like when God said he created man in his image. Then if you're created in God's image, you're a creator. You're supposed to make things. And that doesn't mean you make a business necessarily. That means you make things. Like you have a family, you make things, you can build a house, you do it, whatever it is, you can have whatever, you could journal, you could write, whatever it is, but you're making something beautiful. It could be just a beautiful day that you make for people around you. And that's the expression of being most like God. And that's why those things have to be killed off with our current satanic system, which is, Satan literally just means adversary. So the adversary of us building our best life is being robbed of our energy. It's literally right there in front of you. And then everything else is just a distraction. And if we understand, how to get ahead by, every time and that's why our grandparents, that's why the country was so much wealthier. At the end of World War II, we were 5% of the world's population, and we held 50% of the world's wealth. Okay. That's not true anymore. We're still 5% of the world's population or so, but we don't hold 50% of the wealth. The wealth has been dispersed. Where did it go? Well, it globalized and other things, but we lost it. And we work harder and harder for less and less. And the wealth concentration and the disparity of wealth grows. People say, well, that's why we need socialism. No. Here's the one thing, if your listeners don't leave with anything else, understand that things like communism, like Karl Marx, it's in and of himself was a funded construct of the world's richest people. Every communist revolution is funded by the world's wealthiest, most elite. Okay? The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, heavily financed, only financed by the Warburgs, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. You have to understand that this was a reality that's not organic, that's set into motion. Mao's China, 1949, Rockefeller, Rothschild. It's like they fund communism. So when you see these so-called progressives, and by the way, it's not political at all. But 1913, you get the income tax, 16th Amendment, you get the Federal Reserve, you get the 17th Amendment was the direct election of senators, and you also get the first free trade policy in the United States. I call it the four horsemen of the political apocalypse, and I started talking about that when I ran for Congress in 2013. So it's interesting to those. That's all, by the way, that's all part of the Communist Manifesto. Communism, Marxism is Satan's operating system in the material world through politics. And it just means it's adversarial. It's there to rob you. And people think, well, that's for the little guy, or that's for like, we got to stand up, eat the rich. I'm like, the rich fund the movements that you think are going to eat them. So who is eating it's like a snake eating its own tail. So think about that. If you understand the history, like when I grew up as a kid, it was like communism versus the capitalist. No, the capitalists, the wealthy elite, super elite. I'm not talking about your billionaires. I'm talking about like trillionaires now. And there's trillionaires on this planet, folks. You just don't know who they are. It's not Jeff Bezos is not the richest guy. Elon Musk is not the richest guy in the world. These are dynastic families tied to generational wealth. And they fund socialism. That's why there's a socialism's continue. Like, it's so funny. Politics bores me. Like I see the two parties going at each other, and you'll see somebody like AOC at the red carpet doing something, and she, has that dress as eat the rich or tax the rich or something. And I'm like, the rich fund everything. If they didn't want to be taxed, they would do away with it. They love it. Okay. The rich have all the control in politics. Why do you think the taxes go up? Because they love it. They love it. They love the fact that you can't compete with them. You can't amass wealth like them. You can't do anything that even rivals their control. So the next time you have somebody from the left that's saying, we got to tax. Guys, the elite run that game. You got to stop with that. That's not how you get it. That's what you got to do. Is you got to have accountability, sound money, free markets, equal justice under law. You start going after that, transparency, then the little guy wins or has a chance to win. A lot better off than if you're just playing into their hands, which is when you're playing the political game, you're playing right into their hands. Literally.
The only real currency is energy.
That's right. That's right. It's your thoughts and your energy and what you make in this world, whether it's widgets or whether it's art or whatever it is. It's your energy.
Think about it.
They want to keep you from being able to get ahead.
Yeah, you can't get ahead. You think I would have been struggling to get this freaking podcast off the ground in 5 years if I didn't have the time to do what I wanted and really made me happy, if I didn't have to pay the rent, if I didn't have to sacrifice more time to be with my family and more time to provide? It's the time. It's your energy.
Right. Interesting. And that really, it's spiritual. It's not just, a lot of people stay stuck on the finance, like what stock's going to go up or down. I don't know, man. Like, it's just look at what, use your brain and like what's trending in history, what's going to be, they're going to use more of something in the future or less, is there going to be more blockbuster videos or less? Like use your mind. Like what's going to be more ubiquitous in the future? Is it going to be inline shopping centers or AI? Is it going to be traditional manufacturing, or is it we're going to have some sort of blended robotic system and all this other stuff? Use your head. But more than that, it's about having a spirit of autonomy for yourself and realizing that, you know, you are in control of so much of the reality that you create.
Huh.
Right?
You're
We're
in
all,
control of the reality that you create.
yes. So, because that's the gift God gave you. I'm guilty of not doing it. And
That's a deep one.
every day I get up and I read a little bit of Stoicism, read the Bible. Right now I'm on the wisdom, but I'm rereading Job and Psalms and Proverbs and other things. Job's an interesting book. He has terrible friends. Terrible. You read the book of Job, it's like, what? It's like, it'll make you just want to be a loner.
And his insecurities, man. Oh God.
Well, I
But
mean,
he
the guy's
never
got a
damns his
bad
name.
bargain. I mean, it's got God and Satan just being like, let's bet to see when this guy breaks. You know, it's like, well, that's just a really, really bad, you know, it's like, that's not my view of God, but there's lessons in there about, you know, wisdom in and of itself and the meaning of suffering and other things. But yeah, every day I read back in the 60s and 70s, there was a guy named Joseph Murphy, and he wrote The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And so 20 years ago, I heard somebody on the radio talk about it. And so 21 years ago, and I started reading that. So every day I read a little bit of Joseph Murphy, and I got into some of his like side projects and his other works from like the 60s and 70s. And he died in like 1981, I think. But what an interesting guy. But it's really, you know, I put that into my mind every day about what you speak and, you know, the words you use, the actions, your beliefs, your emotions, like what do you put into reality? And that's part of God's gift to you. And so outside of the whole system of, you know, economics, there's your energy. And you're right. It's one of my favorite quotes is from the movie Wall Street. And well, actually it's Wall Street 2. Michael Douglas, you know, plays Gordon Gekko. And in the original Wall Street, he was like, you know, the most important thing is information. And then by the time he becomes a much older man, 20 years later or whatever, in 2008, when the movie's set, he says, I learned something. He's like, the most precious commodity is not information, it's time. Boom.
Going back full circle. The Bible, biblical spies. I'm telling you, bro. I'm freaking telling you, dude. And it brings back full circle to time. What was I gonna tell you? The ultimate conspiracy is blackmail. It's information. It's what you can hold upon the other person. It's leverage. Always, bro. Leverage. You could have a witch doctor tell you tonight, right now in front of your face, I could make the dead rise, or I could have your dead mom talk to you at night by rubbing this crystal ball. But if they have some type of leverage on you, that doesn't solidify anything. They have that power.
The problem with that is a lot of people ascribe there's power in another person, but there's not. Like, there's not a witch or a witch doctor or a soothsayer or anybody that can do anything to you. It's impossible because you have to believe it. Like Joseph Murphy tells stories about the gold mines in Africa. And this was back in the 60s. If somebody stole from the mine, they'd have the witch doctor come and hand them a note and says, you die at 6 p.m. today. And they'd sit there and die because they believed that the witch doctor cursed them, and they would literally, the suggestion was so powerful. And that's why you got to stand at the door of your mind like a soldier and keep this garbage out of it. Like, you know, the mass media, and I go through so much of the news, and it's so much propaganda and warfare on your mind, like getting you to believe in lockstep with the masses, and that's the way they want you. They want you at each other's throats. They want you broke. They want you placing so much value on an external system when it's an internal system, which is you, that makes the difference. And the reason I do what I do with the metals and crypto and stuff is I just think that that's more in line with what God intended, is because we all have to do something under the sun. We toil, we do whatever, you know, and we want to show something for our work. And I call the monetary system, I call the dollars, I call them Luciferian bankster notes, LBNs. So there's a reason for that.
Hashtag look that up, and I'm gonna make sure to use that on the next episode. I'm
Lucifer
gonna say
and
something real quick right now. It's LBMs. I like
LBN,
that.
yeah.
It's funny. It's funny how things are turning out, and there's never been another perfect moment in life to put this information out than now. The thirst for real and truth and tools to combat the elite, the thirst for it is real today. It's more real than ever. And it's funny because I see it in a podcast. I see more people tuning in, and one person that consumes one podcast can consume 10 other podcasts. And I'm not special by any way, even though I am. But I'm not. The point is, right now is the time to consume, to re-educate, and to pass on the word, to utilize the tools that God has given us, the messengers like yourself that God has sent. And with that, I want you to please plug it in. What is it that you do? Where can people find you? And what's popping? What's next?
Again, thanks for having me on. It's always been a pleasure speaking with you, and I'd love to come back on sometime. I always love to talk about the things that animate me. But yeah, my website direct to find my podcast and links to my shows is just my last name .gold. You go to arterburn.gold. You can also look up my company, which is Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. And we did something a little different with our precious metals. We actually have a subscription program that is unlike anything anybody else has. Starts as low as $50 a month and it goes all the way up to $5,000. We have everybody from across the spectrum that buys from us like that automatically. About 1,400 people across the country. That's just my members for the subscription. But we did that a little different, and nobody else really does that. A lot of the gold and silver companies, they target people with a lot more than $50. And I love my customers. So and we're an educational company too. So you can check that out by going to arterburn.gold or just Googling in Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. You'll be able to find any of the available links. And if you got, you can reach out to my staff. But that's what we do. We've got 2 physical locations, one in Texas, one in Missouri. And I stay busy podcasting and coming on fine programs like yourself and talking history, man.
You brought the hammer of the gods up. You blew it up. You have a great energy. You have an articulate way of coming out things, and you did the show. You picked it up and you torched it out, man. You took it all the way to the finish line. I had to do nothing. All I did was intro and outro. I loved it. Thank you. It was probably one of the easiest conversations I had to do. I didn't have to pick it up. I didn't have to maybe just ask you 1 or 2 questions, but that's it. My input was irrelevant. You freaking took it over,
No,
dude. You did great.
It was good. I remember the first
you did an
time
amazing job.
I started my first radio program. I was out of Dallas in 2013, and I ran for Congress, and I ran against the last World War II veteran in Congress. Anyway, we ended up getting in a runoff, and then I became his ally and his surrogate speaker, and I had him on my show. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny. He had this big stack of notes. He was going to go through all this stuff, and he got in there, and we turned the mics on. And that guy was he's 90 years old at the time. He's such a natural. He's so smart. Anyway, we talked history for an ages, and I just let him go. And I looked at him at the end of the show where the clock was running out. I said, Ralph, you make radio easy. And he just thought that was great. And I'm glad that I'm finally getting close to where Ralph was at 90 years old.
Shout outs to Ralph. Shout outs to Ralph. Yo, everybody, make sure you check him out. Arterburn. ArterburnGold.com.
Gold. Arterburn.gold.
I love it. Make sure you check us out. He's also going to be in the description of the show. Check us out at ParanoidRadio.com. Ladies and gentlemen, drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify because that allows other people to enjoy the show as much as I enjoy making it. Good night. Thank you, bro.